Welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be talking about a very important address that the Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, has given earlier today. And he's spoken about something that is, of course, very important to the democracy and the fundamental progress of the country. And this is, of course, something that the nation expected and wants from its government as well. And this important statement has come in an address that was held earlier today, in which the Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, has said that he will be handing over the government to the caretaker set up in August. Let's take a look at exactly what the Prime Minister said today before we move on with further discussion.
आपने जो जिम्मेदारी मुझे बतौर वज़ीर आज़म सौंपी थी, मुल्क की भलाई, आपकी खैरखाई और ख़िदमत की ये मुक़द्दस अमानत अगस्त 2023 को हम निगरां हुकूमत के सपुर्द कर देंगे इंशाअल्लाह। ये अल्लाह ताला का बेपाया फजल व करम है कि महज 15 माह में हमने 4 साल की बर्बादियों का हत्तुल मकदूर मलबा साफ़ किया।
The Prime Minister earlier today has, of course, given this very important statement, which has put to bay a lot of confusion regarding what is going to be the next step forward from the ruling elite. And this is, of course, an important step forward that the government has decided to. And as the Prime Minister was earlier reiterating as well, this is something that was as promised, and this is part of the government strategy to not do politics, but in fact, make sure that the priority is the state and the government and the people. And these, of course, are actions that have been reflected in a number of measures that the government has taken during its brief time period, including, of course, a very important negotiation with the IMF, which we have seen just a day earlier with the executive board approval of the $3 billion in the standby arrangement, which is a very big achievement for the country, bringing it possibly closer to progress and putting it in a better position as we move forward in the number of economic challenges the country has. And a very tough decision, of course, coming in from a government and the kind of political impact that it may possibly also have. What's important, of course, now is to try and understand what will be the next way forward, particularly regarding the timelines, especially of this particular setup, the handing over of the government to the caretaker setup, and then, of course, the subsequent elections, and then the kind of hindrances that lay in that matter and what will be the possibilities of the role that the ECP and the different political parties will be playing in this regard. We will, of course, at the same time also be taking a look at the political dynamics of the country as they stand and the possible impact that that's going to have over elections and, of course, the public opinion and the choices and the way that the coalition setup is now going to interact in the future and what sort of agreement there is in terms of the different partners coming together for the election. And at the same time, the emergence of new parties in the aftermath, of course, of May 9th is also going to be an important factor given the kind of political dynamics that exist. We also know that this is going to be a tough time, so it will be important to see what sort of narrative and stance the government and different political parties will be taking in, and who, of course, will be the person who's going to be nominated for the prime position of the country. Of course, is going to be an important part. The prime ministerial candidate from different political parties is a choice, of course, that will be an important one too. So we're going to take a look and explore at all of these issues in our discussion today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I have been joined by Senior Analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined in the studios by Leader PML-N, Sardar Ramesh, Singh, Arora. Thank you very much, Sardarji, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. We've also been joined online by journalist Ms. Batool Rajput. Thank you, Ms. Batool, for being a part of the discussion as well. Let me start with you, Ramesh Sahab. The situation, of course, is something which was really important and was part of a lot of discussions. And, of course, the Prime Minister's statement has clarified a lot of those aspects in terms of what the next step is. How important do you think this is in terms of also looking at the completion, of course, of the National Assembly and the impact that that's going to have on the overall democratic procedure, which, of course, is the essence of what different political parties fight for?
Thank you very much, Sana. First of all, thank you for inviting me and having a discussing scenario what next, because after the Prime Minister's speech to the nation, address to the nation. So if you see, there was a propaganda going on for last couple of months that no elections, maybe this government will go along and there will be something in the assembly, and then they will pass a law, amendment in the law, and maybe 1 year, 2 years, it will prolong. And we, the PML-N and the present government of PDM, there was only one point we were discussing again and again, that the essence of the constitution will prevail. And today, when the Prime Minister was addressing to the nation, he categorically said that the government will finish its term, and it's 14th of August, so certainly we will leave the government, and the caretaker setup, the interim setup will come, they will take over, and within the stipulated time, as per the Constitution of Pakistan, either it's 60 or 90 days, whatever it is, so the election will be conducted, and then the new government will come, and certainly that government will get the mandate from the people of Pakistan, and this government will be for the 5 years. And certainly before we are leaving this position at this PDM government, we have signed one of the major success we have achieved. It is the SLA signed between the Pakistan and the IMF. Now today, if you see at the reserves, it's increasing. And there was a situation when the PTI, particularly the leadership of PTI, they were playing a very negative role. And what should I say, when the former finance minister is calling to the former finance minister of KPK and former finance minister of the Punjab that don't go with them and don't support them, we don't want that IMF should come. And certainly the agenda was that the Pakistan should get default, but today it's a great success. Today when the government of present government will leave, there would be a great achievement that we have signed a document with the IMF, and I'm pretty confident. So the people of Pakistan, when they're going to vote, there will be comparison. What we have lost and what we have achieved. What we lost in last 3.5 years when there was a government of PTI, and what we have achieved in these 15 months. Today we are talking about the growth in agriculture. Today we are talking about the innovation and outreach. Today we are talking about the IT. Today we are talking about artificial intelligence. Today we have good relations with our neighboring country. Today the Pak Army, the paramilitary forces, the government is on one page, and that agenda is we have to make this country as a progressive country. So this is one of the major achievements we have achieved so far, and during these 15 months it was not so easy because the situation when we took over in April, it was disastrous. So I really appreciate the team working with the Prime Minister. I really appreciate them, and I'm pretty confident in the next election who has delivered, they will come back.
Right. Ms. Batool, the Prime Minister has also reiterated that these 15 months the government has shied away from doing any sort of politics, and the decisions that they have made or the measures they have taken are based for the progress and the good of the state and the people. And this is important in terms of how we take a look back at these 15 months and take a look at where the coalition parties have the journey that they have come across, of course, from when they took over and up till now. Exactly what do you think has been some of the major aspects that this government can talk about in terms of its achievements and in terms of the tough measures that they had to take? Because many of this, from this time period, we also saw a lot of difficult challenges, including floods, including the IMF, including political turmoil, and a lot more in the country that the government has had to face. So I want you to take a look back at this 15-month time period for us.
Primarily, I believe that the part could have been the unanimity among political parties in PDM. There are more than 10 political parties, and it is very difficult to maintain a consensus, and PDM could do that anyhow. Sometimes it was Maulana Fazlur Rahman who was not very comfortable with the policies proposed by Pakistan People's Party. Sometimes we did saw friction between Pakistan People's Party and PML-N, but eventually we saw that this group it continued with this working relation, good political working relation. But now I think that the deal which is being done between Pakistan and IMF, it is very important to realize that I have been saying this in my program too, that we have to realize that this is not a moment of glory for all of us. This is a success, but it is very tricky. It is on us that how we're going to translate it in future. Is it very inclusive, or we are still enjoying limited external support and we have done nothing inclusively? So I think the unity anyhow was we can praise it, but when it comes to performance, it is very, very questionable. because we saw Mufti Ismail Saab, the ex-finance minister, giving statements. Then there was a clear political conflict between Sardar and Mufti Ismail over the decisions. There was a criticism that the policies are being created and done within Islamabad or from the London, but eventually we saw a deal. And for me, surprisingly, Shahbaz Sharif is not taking its credit. He is giving the credit to the to Chief of Army Staff, which is, I think, which is just quite gracious of him that if he's doing that. But my question is that why civilian governments are not able to take these kind of bigger decisions or unpopular moves or risky moves? Why we always need a sense of security from establishment or from army? So the unity among political parties is very impressive, that they could work anyhow from the last these 15 months. But when it comes to IMF deal, it is not only the civilian government who was doing it. And he said that it was not possible without Chief of Army Staff support or their mutual efforts. But my concern is that I think civilian governments, they need to be more prepared for performance. They need to be more concerned about what their domain is. And if we say,
understand your point, Ms. Batool, but I want to understand whether or not the civil military leadership to be aligned is not an important aspect for the government to function or the state to also move towards progress. Isn't that something that's essential?
This is a very important aspect, and they should always be aligned along with each other. But it doesn't mean that civilian government should stop working on their own. It doesn't mean that they should not get prepared. It doesn't mean that they should stop working. So my concern is that why the sense of security from a political leader is not.
Ms. Batool, I just wanted a clarification. Can you qualify the statement where you say that the civilian government was not working while the military leadership was? Because that's what's being implied here, right?
I'm saying it in context of with the deal with IMF, that it was the mutual effort. But I think it will be more impressive. It would have been more impressive if it would have been done by only civilians. But I think because of the danger of being defaulted, and because of being in this crucial situation, we cannot say that all the institutions cannot work together. But what do I expect in future? That if Shahbaz Sharif says that it can be our last IMF program and we are not going to go in another 25th or 26th IMF program, we are not going to get another bailout. So I pray that it actually happens. And for that, civilian governments have to make a program on its own. They have to do something inclusively. They have to make a policy which can make Pakistan export oriented. They have to work on their how do they tackle their imports. They have to work on their circular data. And for that,
let's explore this a bit further, because this is an important aspect of the politics in Pakistan, and unfortunately has been part of much rhetoric from different political parties as well. So I want to explore it a bit more. And Farrukh, I'd like to take your take on it, and essentially what sort of aspect or relationship did we see in the past 15 months and what we'd like to see between a civilian and a military setup in a country, and of course in a situation in such as in Pakistan, where we've seen a history of an involvement coming in from the establishment as well, and how exactly we want to see this role proceed in the future, and whether or not, particularly what the points Ms. Batool was raising, do you think that the partnership in itself, or the way that both entities have been working together for the cause of the country, is something that is not how it should have happened, or could have been done otherwise, and eventually that's the goal?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
Particularly regarding whether the government was working or not. Who would have thought that a coalition of parties, 13 parties, that if you have lived through 1990s, you would know that all these parties used to be arch enemies, but they actually came together. Who would have thought that such a coalition would survive for 15 months? It has hardly ever happened in Pakistan, right? And yet they stayed together. On one side, on foreign policy front, we kept on seeing that our foreign minister, who is actually head of another coalition party, kept on working very hard. And let us talk about Prime Minister himself. On the last day of the IMF deal, right, or of the IMF program, when we thought that everything is gone and now it is fait accompli that we are not going to complete that program, the Prime Minister actually snatches a victory from jaws of certain defeat. So I think that that would amount to government functioning, right? And we came out of FATF. Remember that we had to go through so many crises which actually compromised our bargaining position. One, of course, it was for the first time that an elected government was pushed out of power through a vote of no confidence. And that was a very vocal, aggressive party, right? It hasn't given up, and you can see that they continue with their snide campaigns and attacks on everybody who is part of the current system. But regardless of that, then unprecedented historic floods that actually destroyed your crop to such an extent that an agricultural country could not actually feed its own people, and it had to import from other countries. Similarly, what was happening in Afghanistan, then very aggressive India. With all those things, I think that we kept on moving forward, and that is a humongous achievement. And that is why we needed all hands on the deck approach. And that's why Army came in. Remember that when Prime Minister is praising Army Chief, he is particularly talking about his role, the role he played in the Arab world, especially in ensuring that the country gets the kind of assurances that IMF actually wanted. So in the Arab world, it is clearly said by the army itself that somehow our army's military diplomacy also works. But this is the amazing part. You are not talking about civil-military relations only, Sana. Here you are talking about going beyond the call of duty, not demanding more power, actually giving your power and your efforts for something that is national cause. So am I going to begrudge any institution that actually goes out of its comfort zone to serve the country and help everybody else? Remember that resurgence of terrorism was also there. There were so many things that happened. Even May 9th took place.
Yeah.
With that kind of a situation, I think if democracy still stands, I think that we are heading towards the right kind of direction where democracy is strengthening, and our democratic ethos is actually going to give civilians supremacy eventually. But of course, there is one thing that I understand, Batool was also mentioning, the difference of competence between the civilian branch and the military branch. Remember, in the military side, you have turnover. In bureaucracy, you have turnover. Every official, every head of the department eventually retires. In political side, on political side, you have this problem that when political parties, none of them have democracy inside them. I mean, they are PTI, PML-N, People's Party, JUIF. Every party has been lagging behind in holding elections which were considered uncontentious, right? Because of that, what happens? When one individual or a few individuals becomes pivot of the party, then whose advice is taken? Not the advice that you need, the advice that you want. And that becomes a problem, right? Because the other side keeps on actually changing and improving because there is a merit system and there is a process of continuous change. That's why they have been more at it, and they understand the circumstances better. We will keep on looking at the political side as well. Hopefully in coming days we will start seeing some kind of turnover. Right now what we are hoping for is a generational turnover, right? One generation goes out of power, their own sons and daughters come to power, but still there is some kind of new intake. So with that kind of a situation possible in coming days, I am hoping that we will see enhanced competence from civilian side. But if you are checking or evaluating the current government on the competence levels, I think that you will be surprised. I was pleasantly surprised how much they have been able to achieve.
Okay, and these are two important indicators that I want to talk to you also about, Ramesh Saab, the aspect of performance and unity as well. First, with reference to performance, as the Prime Minister also said, that the decisions that were taken, of course, were very tough, and many of them could be unpopular as well, and does not put the party into a good light because of the kind of unfortunate repercussions it may have on the public and the challenges that the government has had to face. But these were tough measures that they had to take for the greater good of the country. How exactly will then those decisions be talked about now, and how will the PML-N then take this forward when they're, of course, coming in for the elections? And secondly, the united stance was an important one, but that was against one sort of common enemy, and it was important to make sure that they take control of the progress of the country and bring that factor to light in the public eye as well. But now that perhaps that sort of angle will not remain, how will this united stance show up during the elections, and especially post-elections, when, of course, the different parties have to work together?
Yeah. One thing, let me first respond to the Batool, because Batool raised particularly on the like IMF issue. Let me tell you, we have proven during 2013 to 2018 that the PML-N mean, when we are in the government, it means like a serious working. And if you see 2013 to 2018, we had this IMF program and we worked it out. And particularly if you see, we managed the dollar as well. Now the Prime Minister, when he's addressing to the nation or talking to someone in the media, or when he's in a speech, why he's talking about and praising not only the army chief, also the foreign minister as well, because he strongly believes on the teamwork. He will never say that I'm the one who has done it, and here I would appreciate his political wisdom. Because if you see during last 15 months, as Pitafi said, it was not an easy task to take all these 12 political parties, because everyone has its own manifesto, its own vote bank, its own area, its own geographic spread. So it was not an easy task to take everybody on board. But whenever there's heat, Prime Minister will come and he will be discussing, sitting with everyone and resolving the issue. Particularly difficult task, yes, it was very difficult and challenging when we took over the government, because you know at that time the former Prime Minister took some decisions which were not good for the economy, like he all of a sudden, without the approval of the cabinet, he reduced the price of the fuel. And when we are going to IMF, there was hot words exchanged, lot of other discussions. So it was a difficult and at most a challenging task to increase the price of fuel. We had to, and certainly it reverted back, and the people of Pakistan, the public at large, their sentiments were not good for us, but we took this challenge. Now, when we have signed SLA with the IMF, what I foresee, this agreement with the IMF, now I foresee the people of Pakistan, they are very well aware, and particularly this 9th May incident has proven, whenever we talk, that the previous government was serious threat to the country, and there were some hidden agendas, there were some hidden forces who are like playing in our country, and it has proven when you are going to attack Jinnah House, when you are going to attack the places of civil, like the Radio Pakistan and some other places, and you're targeting those who have devoted their life to the country. So it's proven. Now, when because we are in the public, so public sentiment is with the PML-N, and in the forthcoming election, you will see people will come to the PML-N, and PML will come back. And particularly when we're talking about the other political parties and the new emerging political parties who are taking place in the system, so everyone has its own vote bank, and everyone has its own manifesto. But we will go into the election, and where will we have some seat adjustment with the political parties, we will go for them. But everyone would be in the election mode.
Okay. Ms. Batool, I want you to also take a look at the important factors and areas which will be of a lot of significance, particularly in the way that the elections will then proceed and the kind of strategy and narrative the different political parties will be taking over. We understand, of course, the economic challenges are important, and that is going to be part of it as well. But what else do you think will significantly show up and sort of be important indicators and measures of how the different political parties would like to proceed?
I believe that 9th May center point of how political parties are going to make their narrative in future, how they're going to run their election campaigns, what will be their engineering or electioneering campaigns. Uh, but I think primarily the ninth way will be something you'll see that it will be highlighted in social media, on TV, and political parties will be very conscious of this. But I think that eventually what they are going to see, or they're going through, or they have to absorb and they have to work for is performance. This IMF deal has been done, and we badly needed it. And unfortunately, we had no other plans. If you talk even to the biggest economist in the world, he will only say that Pakistan. Unfortunately, we don't have anything inclusive to offer to our people. We don't have any other country to support just for the sake of it that we need it. It is not going to happen. The external financing is completely dependent on how we are going to deal with IMF, and we, alhamdulillah, we did it. And as a Pakistani, we needed it. It is not for one particular party or one particular institution. Pakistan badly needed it, and alhamdulillah, it's done. But we cannot ignore the challenges those are ahead. If you see the reports of international ranking agencies, our ranking it has been upgraded, but it is not very encouraging. It does not say that inflation is going to be decreased. It does not say that the purchasing power of common man is going to be increased. It does not say that your circular debt will be decreased. It does not say that your provinces are going to produce in a surplus. It does not say that in Pakistan that the taxation system will be very encouraging. So we have to see that what else can we do except being relaxed by the fact that okay, this deal has been done. So this is the area where all political parties they need to work. They need to present a proper plan. Interestingly, in these times, you are seeing political parties that are made up overnight. People are leaving a particular party. You don't need the manifesto, but you need a group on TV. Then you see the people they're joining in more. But the point is, we don't see any manifesto. We don't see what they're going to do with elections. Even if they're not going to rely on electables, how they're going to do it. So I think it's just the performance that people are going to bother. I think it's just the performance that worth it. And I think it's just the performance that every political parties needs to work on. And without Nawaz Sharif's presence, how PML-N is going to do it, we will have to see this, because I think the vote bank of PTI is still intact. Fortunately and unfortunately, it is still a challenge. We have to see this now through times, that whether the vote bank of PTI has been dismantled or not.
Right.
PTI has
And
been
Ms. Batool,
dismantled.
I want to
PTI is
explore this
not.
further. When you say the
But
vote bank
how
of
vote
PTI,
bank
we
is
of
going
course
to
have seen
translate.
that there was a large exodus from the party, and then there was an emergence of another one as well. So exactly how has that impacted the vote bank, and where will that vote bank then go now in these elections?
Is this question for me?
Yes.
See, but it is very interesting. I recently I read a book, and I was observing that how the vote bank of Janjaweed traveled, and it molded itself, and it went to other political parties. So it eventually came to Musharraf, then it eventually came to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. So I hope you can understand, because I was going to some analytics, and I was going through some data, and so that data said that if we only pick up the vote bank of Janjaweed and how it went to and got divided into another political party, so it came to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. So I hope you can relate to the mindset, or relate to the choice of the voter, that you can understand through the reference that I've given you. So I think the PTI's vote bank, I think maybe the vote bank would go to some independents, or people might not vote, because I'm saying this responsibly, because because Imran Khan's following, they were behaving like a cult. They're full of emotions. full
Right,
of
but Ms. Batool,
disagreements.
so just correct me if I'm wrong. What I wanted to understand is when you say that the PTI's vote bank is intact, you just mean to say that that vote bank will not go to a PML-N or PPP, so to speak, and might just be addressed elsewhere, but not PTI. That's what you're saying.
Because yeah, obviously, because the kind of follower Imran, it is very difficult to break that vote. The kind of mentality they had. So I don't think so that that vote bank will go to PMLN or Pakistan People's Party. It can go somewhere else. It can go to some independents. But again, it depends on the see. Eventually, people want independence. In Libya, we saw a dictatorship for decades because the people they were getting things the basic necessities of their life. So, but eventually we saw a revolution there. As long as people are getting what they want on daily basis, they don't bother who's in government. Frankly,
Okay. All right, let's talk about that a bit
with
more because Farrukh, I also want to explore, of course, the way that the emerging parties, especially the IPP, also is going to then feature in the next elections, and whether or not this can be something that can just be seen in terms of a PPP versus PML-N election, or whether there's going to be more to the game, and what exactly will then the PTI or the followers of PTI are going to factor in all of this.
Well, it is not going to be a People's Party versus PML-N election.
Okay.
Of course, there is a party called PTI so far in that running, and then you have a religious vote bank, and as you pointed out, IPP is also. So it is essentially going to be a five-way run, right? And with that kind of a situation, of course, things are going to be complicated, and we are going to end up with a hung parliament. That is the likely outcome. Okay. But I want to actually dwell upon a few things that were said earlier by Batool. One thing I have to commend her for is regarding political parties and how they have not been able to evolve. This is my biggest concern, that all institutions in the country, in right way or the wrong way or whatever way possible, keep on trying to evolve. But the only institution that doesn't seem to evolve in this country is political parties. And why? Because when you are in power, not in power, and you have presence in the parliament, then you are supposed to have shadow governments. You have never seen shadow governments by any political party, any opposition in the country. Similarly, particularly she was talking about manifestos. Manifestos have never carried any kind of weight at all. And then along came PTI. You know, for 22 years, it was, a kind of musical chair between People's Party, PML-N, and whenever establishment wanted, between establishment. But then PTI came after 22 years, and people thought that finally there is going to be some change. What happened then, Sana? Biggest fear of the state itself is somebody who actually does not understand the importance of the office. And we have seen that when the former guy was being pushed out of power, he was ready to demolish everything. And after even in exile from power, he has been trying to do exactly that. So what exactly is the lesson for the lesson that the establishment or state has learned here? A very simple one. Don't go for new experiments. Now, PTI, whether it was a good experiment or bad experiment, but there will come many good experiments in the future. They are going to be organic parties because Pakistan has a youth bulge, and then with that youth bulge, you also have to empower the local tier or the last tier of governance as well. With that kind of a situation, you are bound to have new experiments by the people of Pakistan, but then the state will also look at them cynically or skeptically. So that becomes a problem, and that's why I keep on saying that political parties need to evolve. They need to have some modicum of electoral democracy within, and then some kind of homework when they come into power. Having said that, now regarding the overall situation and who's going to actually go ahead, I'm going to reference to public intellectuals, right? One, this idea about PTI keeping its vote back intact. My biggest problem is lack of data. We, of course, live in cities. We go and meet people who are urban middle class, and they keep on telling us that they are going to either vote for PTI or they have voted for PTI and they haven't changed their mind. But we forget that how big this country is. This country is not merely name of 4 or 5 cities, Sana. It has countless cities and countless villages where actual electoral politics takes place, and that we forget. So one public intellectual is our colleague also, Khurram Hussain, who has written a column today for Dawn and exactly on the same issue. How much we don't want to rely on data at all. So what are we basing this assessment on PTI's popularity on? Only 2 things. One, you know, this kind of personal experience that I was talking about. Secondly, you know, a few by-elections that took place last year when the party was actually pushed out of power. And the second public intellectual is my professor also, Professor Muhammad Wasim. Recently talking about Pakistan's democracy, he said Pakistan's democracy is primarily establishment-minded democracy. What does it mean? That people want to vote for people who actually align with the state of Pakistan, not against it. And because that is the case, so PTI is not getting this point right now that it might be able to physically assault or attack the state institutions, but when it comes to voters, eventually their turnout will actually thump them. And that's why we don't know who is going to be the Prime Minister, but I can safely say that PTI is not going to be the one that is going to form the next government.
All right. Ramesh Saab, there are a couple of questions that I want to ask, especially in terms of getting an insight as to what is going on and what the party, the direction the party is moving into. And one is, of course, in relation to the Prime Minister's address, that he said that he will be, of course, handing over the government to the caretaker setup in August, but exactly when is that going to be, particularly also because it has a direct impact on when the elections are going to be held. Secondly, what's the update on the return of Mr. Nawaz Sharif and his role in the upcoming politics and especially the election campaign? And number 3, who will be the prime ministerial candidate and what's the party direction in terms of that in these upcoming elections?
When the government is going to hand over the government to the caretaker setup, so when it comes, like it's 14th of August, so certainly the date is 14th of August or one day before or 14th of August. So certainly when the time will come, it will be
14th or one day before.
Yeah, so it will be handed. Yeah, it will be handed over to the caretaker. Now, Mia Nawaz Sharif Saab, yes, if you see, our senior leadership has categorically said the Mia Saab will come back and he will be playing his key role in the forthcoming election. As long as PML is concerned, let me tell you, when Maryam Nawaz Sharif Sahiba, she came back to Pakistan and now she is the chief organizer and she is going to evolve this party as a party of not only those where we have a senior leadership, we are categorically working particularly on the youth and women. If I talk about particularly because I represent the minority wing, I am the General Secretary of PML-N minority wing at the national center level, so we are rigorously working of the for the party, like we are bringing more people. We are working at the from the UC level, from the village level, then the PP level, then the constituency level, at the national level, and then district and the provincial level. So a lot is going on, and I'm pretty confident that under the leadership of Maryam Nawaz Sharif Sahiba, because the way she's working and she's bringing everyone at par and giving the task, and every day you see she is working for the party. So in forthcoming election, Maryam Nawaz Sharif Sahiba, she will lead the election campaign along with Mia Nawaz Sharif Saab and Hamza Saab and the other leadership and Shehbaz Sharif Saab.
So does that mean that she will be the prime ministerial candidate?
This is something which will be decided by the party. What party decides, it will certainly, there's a body, there's our CEC. So CEC will sit down and they will discuss who will be the next prime minister candidate. So whosoever will be the prime minister candidate, we are confident that the PML-N has proven every time that this party has experience and we can take this country to the next level. Next time when we are coming, because if you see, during this 15 months, it was much more difficult to put our own agenda while taking out of this country to end or taking this country to the next level, because what I see in next 5 years, one of the major tasks which we have to take care, that is the involvement of youth, and there must be a political stability. If we don't have a political stability, then we should not expect that the foreign investor will come. Then we should not expect that the people living outside the Pakistani diaspora, the overseas Pakistani, how they will be coming back. So we need to work hard that we should build the confidence of the overseas Pakistani, so they will be sending more and more foreign reserves, foreign exchange to the Pakistan. So certainly it will help the country's economy. We need more investors.
Right.
And one major thing we need to work on that is youth development. And this is our agenda, this is our manifesto that will be working with more and more with the youth.
Absolutely. But regarding the return of Mr. Nawaz Sharif, I also want to understand whether there's an exact time frame for that, and also moving forward, what sort of challenges do you think still remain in terms of his participation in the political process, and how will PML-N be countering that?
Look, as there was a discussion going on, so I see that the Nawaz Sharif will be coming back to the Pakistan. It's September. So once he's coming back in September, so most of the cases, because all of those cases which were fabricated by the PTI government, which were fabricated by the Imran Khan, just to satisfy his own ego. So all of those cases, what I see, because if they don't have any strong footing and they're just basis on the fabrication, so I think the courts will bail out him, and Nawaz Sharif will coming back, and he will be playing his key role, pivotal role.
All right. All right, Ms. Batool, the of course caretaker setup and the role of the ECB is going to be really important also when we talk about the upcoming elections. What sort of challenges do you think would there be in first, of course, the actual setup of the caretaker government, and then of course the kind of economic challenges and the procedural challenges that the ECB will then also have to face, and how will they affect the possibility of the timeline of the elections? Do you think that this is a given, that they will be held within this year, or do you think there's another possibility?
First, let me about the economic aspect, because the money that we have got from IMF, it has to be dealt by three governments, this government, then another caretaker government, and then the next government. So it is very important to have this political consensus on how this package has been dealt, or how is it going to be tackled in coming years, in coming months. Because if we see any more political instability, nobody is going to bother this package anymore. Like we saw that in the last months of PTI government, they did not bother what they committed to IMF. They made their own deals. They announced their own very much subsidies that the PDM had to suffer, and because of that, it had become very difficult for Pakistan to revamp the package. But I believe that the challenge is still not gone, as this package has to be seen, or has to be dealt by three different governments and three different sizes of the government, three different kind of resources, three different kind of teams. So it is a surprise to see how these three kind of teams are going to maintain that impression and confidence on each other, to not derail the commitment that Pakistan and the present Prime Minister had shown, and the commitment to IMF. So I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we are going to see economically. And in political aspect, I want to say that it is very important that any caretaker government has to have the team which is not bending towards an angle, or a person, or a team, or a political party which is not inclined toward anybody. It is responsible for the transparent conduction of general elections. And if we see appointments in bureaucracy or other public posts, if we see any political inclination, that will be dangerous for the conduction of election. That will make the transparency of elections questionable. So I hope it does not happen. And recently, the names were circulated.
We're short on time, so I'll just quickly move on to Farrukh as well. Farrukh, anything you'd like to add before we conclude?
Yeah, regarding this three governments actually taking care of IMF program, I think that is the whole point of seeking a 9-month program, right? Because that ensures that three governments actually sail through, and then the country doesn't plunge into any kind of default or any economic crisis. Let us be honest, usually the commitments made are made by the state, not by the government. who runs the government of who runs the state, of course, government. But usually when there is a caretaker government in power, it is not essentially caretaker government that is running the show. Most powers go away and they go to the Election Commission of Pakistan. With these two governments, actually, we know that commitments will be followed. Then a third government comes, and of course, they are going to look forward and they are going to take care of 5 years. So they won't be that much, afraid of talking to IMF or actually making tough decisions for the economy as well. Regarding who is going to lead the party, whether Nawaz Sharif Saab is going to come back, I think he's coming. And secondly, one thing was said about Maryam Nawaz Sahiba as well, who has been rightly leading the party and has been a crowd puller. So I was looking at various PDM parties and how many prime ministerial candidates there are. And then I thought that perhaps these political parties need to learn from what happened in India. Congress party does not nominate a PM candidate, and that is why every time it comes to power, it has to scurry around and find a PM candidate, right? On the other side, BJP had a prime minister candidate, and that's why they became very comfortable in taking power. And Congress and other parties kept on receiving thumping. Now, right now, when you talk about these political parties, they haven't made their mind who's going to be the prime ministerial candidate. That should be clear, Sana, before you head to the elections.
Absolutely.
If that is clear, it will take care of all the problems that are there, because the other side, PTI, is very clear who's their PM candidate. So remember, these factors matter a lot in elections.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh. Thank you very much, Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora Saab, and thank you, Ms. Batool Rajput, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. There is, of course, much that remains to be seen and many challenges that are there for, of course, the current government, the caretaker setup, and the next government coming in as well. But what's important is that the democratic process is prevailing, and that's good news for everyone. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.